darkness strikes deep into your life, it will creep. Starts when you're always afraid. Step out of line, they'll come, they'll take you away. You think it's time to stop? Children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Stop, children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Stop, children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Stop, children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Stop, hey, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down. Stop, children, what's that sound? Everybody look what's going down.
Hey, right on, y'all. Hey, we're really glad you're here. We've been jump-starting events like this all around the country for the last 6 years. And you know where, will you give me a little bit more volume out of that? Because I feel like I'm going to yell at these people. About 6 years ago, right over there in that theater, we had a little get-together. Do some of you remember that day? Thank you for being here. And on that day, the people of this area turned up, and they turned out, and they turned that election around. And then in 2020, you turned that election around. And then in 2022, you did it again, and then you took care of what went on in Ottawa County, and now you're showing up next Tuesday, and you're going to make sure that what happens in Michigan is on the side of the Kamala good, if you know what I'm saying. Now, friends, I want to take you back to 1974. 50 years ago. Who would have thought in 1974 that in 50 years we would be looking at what we're looking at now from the Republican Party? I voted for Republicans. Anybody else voted for Republicans? I felt good about voting for Republicans. There might be people today who still feel good about voting for Republicans. We understand that, but not me, and maybe not you. And I could have imagined 50 years ago that, you know, some things could change in America. But never would I imagine that we would have to argue if the other night in Madison Square Garden, if that looked more like a Nazi rally or more like a Trump rally. Who would have thought that we would have to make our plans tomorrow to take these two beautiful buses and drive them to Springfield, Ohio, so we can stand with refugees and asylum seekers from Haiti because the former president of the United States is saying that they're eating your dogs. Now, friends, we could stand here all night reminding us why voting for Donald Trump would be a problem. But we don't need to list that all up for you. That man is like a self-cleaning oven. He does all the work for you. You know why. But I do want to encourage you to think back 50 years and then to think forward 50 years. Because there are some decisions we have to make. We have decisions in this country about who and how we're going to be. Now, every day, every one of us makes our life decisions. We think about our families. We think about our communities. We think about our health. We think about a lot of things. And every couple of years, you're asked to think about, who do you want to lead the country? And I got to tell you, most people, they don't spend their time every day in between elections thinking about that stuff, right? For some of us, we don't think about politics until we're right up on top of it. Then it's, what am I going to put in the Halloween basket? What am I going to wear in Halloween costumes? And who am I going to vote for? Sneaks up on us. But I guarantee you that people all around here, this election hasn't snuck up on them, has it? No. They know what's going on. They know that this lineup of candidates are not just representing a party. They don't just want to represent a state assembly. They want to represent the very best of West Michigan. They want to represent the very best of their community. They want to represent the very best of what people 50 years from now could look back on and say, thank you for what you did. Thank you for turning up, for turning out, and for turning it on. Now, you know that you all live in a swingy district, in a swingy state, in the swingiest election in a long time. So swingers, it's time for the people of Holland, Michigan, who are known as the country's great swingers, to know that they've got to turn out. How many of you have already voted? Look at all those hands. Thank you for voting. I don't want to pick you out as perhaps one of the younger ones, but was this your first election to vote in? First presidential election. Thank you for voting. Thank you for turning out. This guy sitting right here in the blue hat with a comma law on it, which, by the way, you can pick up over here at the table on your way out. Some people still have a hard time pronouncing the next president's name, so we want to help him because it's going to come up a few times over the next 8 years. But that man sitting right there is Tim Gilman. He travels with us, lives in the state of Washington, but he's been on this bus so long that they didn't have the ballots in his state available for him yet, so he had it shipped here, and he sat right there and voted a few minutes ago. Thank you, Tim, for voting right there. If anybody's still yet to vote, the early voting might be open in that building right over there. We invite you to head on over. Now, you might be asking yourself, why are you bringing up 50 years ago, 1974, 50 years from now, 2074? You recognize that that's 100 years. That's a generation. Well, 50 years ago today, Christy Berghoff's mother gave birth to Christy Berghoff. And 50 years after that, Christy decided to come stand here and say a few things about what that birth meant and what she hopes the next 50 years is going to look like. So you already know how to do this. Would you welcome that person, Christy Berghoff? And happy birthday. Would somebody like to start singing that for young Christy?
Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday to you. Happy birthday, dear Christy. Happy birthday to you.
Well, hey, Holland. That was a nice way to start my time here. Well, as Doug said, my name is Christy Berghoff, and I grew up in this town. Yeah. This town with its tulip-lined streets, its tulip festival, its tulip theology. You know. Well, the particular community I was a part of in Holland, the people that surrounded me, were very conservative, Christian, Republican, white, middle-class folks. Now, these were good people. These are the people who instilled values in me like honesty, integrity, respect, kindness, empathy, the importance of telling the truth, hospitality, generosity, decency. Well, after college, I worked for a Republican member of Congress on Capitol Hill, and that experience eventually compelled me to go to seminary. It was there I met my husband, Brian, and after seminary, we began planting churches. And eventually, that church planting journey took us right back here to Holland, back to my hometown. We came back with our 4 kids. And soon after we got back here, in 2016, many of the good people of my hometown supported Donald Trump. Boldly and proudly. I had never seen this kind of love and adoration for a political figure in all my 50 years of living, ever. He won with the help of those good folks in my hometown, right here in Holland. His words and behaviors have had real consequences right here in our community and all across the country. This was infuriating to witness the harm that was done to so many people. But it was baffling that so many of the good people in my hometown right here in Holland not only approved of such godless rhetoric and behavior, but they amplified it. Yep. As a mom, it was especially difficult to know how to explain all this to my kids. How to explain why so many Christian people around them so enthusiastically supported a man who celebrates the strength of dictators and calls the compassionate weak, who mocks the disabled, who implements intentionally cruel border policies separating terrified and traumatized children from the comfort of their mother's arms. This man who has assaulted women, who spews filth and lies like it's his full-time job, who undermines democracy in broad daylight, who issues racist rhetoric, who supports pillaging the planet for profits, the profits of his friends at the expense of the whole world, who continually disparages women and people of color and immigrants and Democrats and those struggling to make ends meet, and even every single Republican who does not get in line behind him. And he does these things while he waves a Bible in front of the camera. How do I explain that to my kids? Well, my friend Shane Claiborne, who sometimes gets on this bus with us, he says, the question really isn't who is Donald Trump. The question is, who are we? Who are we? Well, part of who we are is revealed in our public witness. And that witness has devolved into something particularly disturbing. Well, this community here, you all, Holland, taught me to tell the truth, and so I am. Ironically, there's anger directed at me for taking seriously this thing that I was taught to do. And my friend Dan is going to sing a song about that later. But the story here does get a bit more hopeful. Because in response to the wide and tragic embrace of Donald Trump, our faith community, Holland UCC, and other faith communities all across this area and across denominations came together, and together we began to wake up. Together we began to stand up. And together we began to speak up for a more just and good world. We were not going to stay quiet. You all were not going to stay quiet, and we did not. We began holding rallies and protests and marches right here in this park, Holland, Michigan. We were protesting, and it was incredible. We were writing members of Congress together in a more organized fashion. We were getting involved in advocacy work all together. We were pleading for systems that would help, not hurt, our neighbors in need. And you know, it turned out that a great many people around us had been quietly questioning their partisan affiliation, more than we realized. Quietly, folks were troubled by what they were seeing. Quietly, they were sensing the backwards way in which Donald Trump and many leaders in the Republican Party were not only distorting democratic ideals, but distorting the public expression of our Christian faith, a faith that many of us have held dear for so many generations. One by one, people across our community began cracking open their doors, stepping outside and saying, "Me too, I want to join in this work too. What can I do?" A growing number of lifelong Republicans began naming the elephant in the room, that the Republican Party has strayed away from the core of its very own values and devolved in something unrecognizable and unconscionable. As you know, Holland has historically been deeply religious and politically conservative. But in 2020, after 4 years of Donald Trump, after 4 years of coming together in this way to remind ourselves of our deepest values in the face of his leadership, for the first time in decades, a greater percentage of this city voted blue than red. And so our little religious pocket right here in West Michigan revealed itself indeed to be first and foremost committed to its values. What we did here had significant impact on Michigan saying no to Donald Trump and his recklessness. People of faith in this town made the common good their voting criteria. People of faith chose to vote based on their values and not their tired, inherited, partisan identity. In 2024, people of faith all over the country are snapping awake, and we're seeing it. This movement to reclaim our values in the public space is growing. It's getting bigger. More and more people are standing up together to say enough. We're sick and tired of the normalization of lies and slander. We want to normalize truth and kindness again. We want to tear down walls. We want to tear down walls and build bridges across our many divides, and that starts with infusing the fruit of the Spirit back in our hearts. We're committed to replacing fear-based narratives with hopeful stories. Rather than continuing to oppress the voices that have historically been kept away from the tables of dialogue and decision, we want to lift those voices up. We're determined to respond to all the hatred with love because God so loved the whole world. We're declaring what God declares, that immigrants are a blessing, not a burden. We want to give God's dignity back. That's what we want to do. You know, people ask me as we're traveling around the country, how can you, as a mother of 4, get on that bus and leave your children and take off for weeks at a time? Well, we're a country in crisis. In 2024, democracy is on the ballot. I'm doing this for my kids. I'm doing this for your kids. I'm doing this for everyone who comes after us. That's why I'm getting on this bus. Each one of us has to find our thing and do it, because every one of us is a part of the fabric of who we are together as a community. We don't know what the outcome of this election will be. We don't know. There's a lot of uncertainties, actually. But as people of faith, we must persist in building a world where everyone has the opportunity to thrive. So let's do that together. Thanks.
Thank you, Christy. And that just beautifully articulates why I'm on this bus and why I felt like in the aftermath of 2016, I had to say something. And so I put my frustrations, my anger, my disappointment into this song. It's called Hymn for the 81%. And that's a reference to the 81% of white evangelical Christians who voted for a man that looks nothing like Jesus, and then continued to celebrate him after every line in the sand was crossed. And so this is a bit of my story. Maybe it's a bit of your story as well. I grew up in your churches, Sunday morning and evening service. I knelt in tears at the foot of the rugged cross. You taught me every life is sacred. Feed the hungry and clothe the naked. I learned from you the highest law is love. I believed you when you said I should trust the words in red to guide my steps through a wicked world. I assumed you'd do the same, so imagine my dismay when I watched you lead the sheep straight to the wolves. You said to love the lost, well, I'm loving you now. You said to speak the truth, I'm calling you out. Why don't you live the words that you put in my mouth? May love overcome and justice roll down. Oh, they started putting kids in cages, ripping mothers from their babies, and I look to you to speak on their behalf. Oh, but all I heard was silence, or worse, you justified it, singing glory, hallelujah, raise the flag. See, your fear it turned to hatred, but you baptized it with language torn from the pages of the good book. You weaponized religion, and you wonder why I'm leaving to find Jesus on the wrong side of your walls. You said to love the lost, well, I'm loving you now. You said to speak the truth, well, I'm calling you out. Why don't you live the words that you put in my mouth? May love overcome and justice roll down. Come home, come home. You're better than this. Oh, you taught me better than this. Come home, come home. You're better than this. I used to think you were better than this. Come home, come home. Oh. Maybe I was too naive, or I just didn't want to see that there's always been a little poison in the well. Our churches sit on stolen land, a nation built by stolen hands, and we use the Bible to justify it all. Yeah, from slavery and segregation to mass incarceration. This is who we are, but not who we have to be. There's a lot of work to do to pull up the evil by the roots, but repentance has to come before there's peace. And you said to love the lost, I'm trying to love you now. You said to speak the truth, that's why I'm calling you out. Why don't you live the words that you put in my mouth? May love overcome and justice roll down. May love overcome and justice roll down. May love overcome and justice roll down. overcome, and justice roll down. Thank you so much. And now it is my distinct honor to welcome my friend Genesis B to the stage. So let's keep that applause going for Genesis B, everybody.
You know, I hear that song every day on this tour, sometimes 3 times a day. And I always get emotional. Who else feels that tightness in their chest? That lump in your throat when he hits those notes, man. Dan, classic. Song's going down in history. Christy, happy birthday. I pray all your biggest dreams come true. I'm emotional, so I'm trying to gather myself. My name's Genesis B. I'm the Poet Laureate of Vote Common Good. Thank you. And I come from a beautiful state called Mississippi. And I do mean beautiful. One of the most beautiful places I've ever been, and I've been all around the world. And I've never seen something as beautiful as a Mississippi sunset. As beautiful as it is, it has a lot of issues, historically and currently. Deep issues rooted in racism, misogyny, homophobia. And when I was a little kid, I had to navigate these systems. And it made me want to leave, get out as fast as I could. I said, if only I could leave Mississippi, I can escape the racism, the misogyny, the homophobia. And then I left. And guess what?
Still there.
I realized that Mississippi is a microcosm of my nation. Police exoneration and mass incarceration. Black and brown bodies, a commodity. Mothers separated from babies, border policy. It's like the White House is painted in the Klan's ideology, and our leadership is exploiting white poverty. Think about it. Keeping us separate and divided, gay versus straight, white versus black, based off of fear and far from the facts. See, I hail from a state called the mighty Mississippi. My state flag held the stars and bars praising a brutal history. It flew in front of schools and in my judge's court, sending a clear message to us that our lives are not important. Cause my dad was only 5 when the Klan drive by, bust bullets into his house with 6 children inside, a Confederate flag flying high, and these are the truths that some choose to deny. See, Mississippi, like America, eats your child and mine. The white supremacists' lie is a prison of their own design. They forfeited their humanity in order to deny mine. Because supremacy is a lie. Some have accepted it. A Confederate curse they inherited. Bigotry is blinding, and their fear of the other has blocked their own blessings from their sisters and brothers. Outrage, fatigue, I'm screaming I can't breathe. From the top, it trickles down. From our judges to police. Because the illusion of freedom is far more dangerous than any jail cell or cramped cages. I said, the illusion of freedom is far more dangerous than any jail cell or cramped cages. Yes, Mississippi is a microcosm of my nation, where cowards replace white sheets with fake avatars, repeating their parents' folklore, Tooth Fairy, Santa Claus. The history's whitewashed. Google black codes and bylaws. In the comment section, sound off, sound off. Lord, they sound off, don't they? Call me a nigga, a bitch, or a dyke. You call me whatever you like. I've been through worse in this fight. And the hatred in their words just proves that I'm right. Because Mississippi is a microcosm of a country that always needed me but never wanted me. My melanin and skin is a sin? Sentence to build your economy? No. But they pack the prisons and fill the quota, make us felons, suppress the voters, travel bans and deportation, killer cops, no resignations. Just federal indictments and mock trials. You see, My heart bleeds as that billboard reads, "Make America white again," as my favorite rapper concedes. Kanye. Making me question everything that I believe. But still, I love America. I do. Because I have hope. Some choose to jump ship, and some steer the boat.
That's right.
See, I know that love and humanity lives in the smile of every child, in the heart of every kid. So be brave enough to break the curse. We need you at the polls, out in droves, fighting against the bigots you oppose. Study law, run for office, make a call, write your Congress. Use your voice and choose a march. Malcolm's gone, grab the torch.
Yeah.
Read a book, write a rap. Just speak with truth and deal with facts, please. Alt-right affiliation of Trump's administration, Confederate infiltration, neo-Nazi showing faces. Just fueling the fear and the hatred while expanding their corporations. Do you see now how Mississippi is a microcosm of my nation? I'm Genesis B, y'all. Thank you. I love you, Holland.
Give it up again for Genesis B. This is the best. The best. Hi, folks. My name is Rob Ryerson. I'm a pastor from Fayetteville, Arkansas. It's a real pleasure to be with you this evening. You know, we've been traveling all over the country. We've been in Arizona, in Georgia, in North Carolina. We've been in Wisconsin. We've been in Pennsylvania. We're here in Michigan. And if you are like most folks that we've encountered over our bus tour across the country, you're probably feeling a little nervous right now. So I thought I would tell you a story. It's a story that is told famously in a movie called Monsters, Inc. Do you remember Monsters, Inc.? Monsters, Inc. tells the story of a factory called Monsters Incorporated. And it's a factory that runs on the screams of children. And so the factory employs monsters to sneak into kids' bedrooms and scare them. And then those screams are converted into power, converted into energy that keeps the factory going. One of the monsters one day ends up in the bedroom of a little girl named Boo. And Boo doesn't find the monster scary, she finds him funny. And instead of screaming, she laughs. And what they realize by the end of the movie is that the laughs of the children are actually more powerful than their screams. Joy is more powerful than fear. Our politics has been dominated by fear for a long time. Fear that scares us into voting who we're going to support or not support. Fear that turns us against our neighbor. Fear that causes us to be up all night worrying about how an election is going to turn out. And certainly that nervousness, that fear has a place. But I think it's important for us to remember over the next week that that fear is not nearly as powerful as the joy and the hope and the optimism that we can have is. In fact, I think we've learned over the last 100 days, thanks to a tremendously joyful candidate at the top of the ticket, just how refreshing and wonderful it is to feel some hope and some optimism and some joy. I think America is having its Monsters, Inc. moment right now. Now, maybe one of the things that you're nervous about, maybe one of the things that you're afraid of is those people in your life that you just can't figure out why they vote the way they do. Do you have family members like this? I do. I don't think my mom's watching, so I'll just go ahead and mention her. I have people in my life that are that way, and it is so nerve-wracking. And I want to encourage you tonight that that people change. People change. I know this because I am someone who has changed. I grew up very Republican, like very Republican. So, for instance, I was really into politics when I was a teenager, and so I had on the wall of my bedroom autographed pictures. I had a Bob Dole picture. I had this freshman congressman from Georgia that nobody had ever heard of named Newt Gingrich. Had an autographed picture of him. I was a caller on the Rush Limbaugh show. Got on the air 5 times. Yeah. You didn't know you were with a celebrity tonight, did you? Yeah. One summer for summer camp, I went to teenage Republican school. Basically, what I'm telling you is I was the coolest kid in my school. That's basically what I'm telling you. You know, I grew up deeply embedded in all of that. And through a number of circumstances and situations in my life, a lot changed for me. And I'll tell you the thing that most brought change in my life, it wasn't the guilt and shame of someone else trying to argue with me about it. It was the kindness, the grace, the love, the joy, the hope, and the optimism that won me over. So as you think about that person in your life, try to remember, I'm a pastor, so I'm going to quote the Bible, what the Apostle Paul said in the book of Romans, that it's God's kindness that leads us to repentance. It's kindness that changes us. As you think about that person in your life, I want to give you tonight just one little phrase you can use in talking with them. One of the things that we've learned through our work with Vote Common Good is that identity change is really, really difficult, but behavioral change is much easier to make happen. And behavioral change happens before identity change happens. Like, none of you that are, Michigan State fans are going to wake up tomorrow and be like, I root for the University of Michigan now. Like, it just doesn't happen. None of you that are University of Michigan fans are going to wake up tomorrow and be like, I'm an Ohio State fan now. I mean, you should, but you're not. That's for you, Brian Berghoff. I grew up in Ohio. I can say these things. Your identity, how you think of yourself, that just doesn't change overnight. But behavior can change. And so what we encourage folks to do is to invite their friends and family not to change their identity, but to change their behavior. And voting is a behavior. So here's what you can say. I'm not asking you to become a Democrat. I'm asking you to vote for Kamala Harris in this election. Give that little permission structure to change behavior. I'm not asking you to become a Democrat. I'm asking you to vote for Jessica Schwartz in this election. I'm not asking you to become a Democrat. I'm asking you to vote for Hillary Scholten in this election. That little permission structure can bring about a behavioral change. And here's the thing. It's like when the little stone hits your windshield and you get that little nick in your windshield. And then a couple of weeks later, like the crack has spread and now you have a big crack in your windshield. Once someone begins to make this shift and their behavior changes, a couple of elections from now, their ballot is going to be blue from top to bottom. We ask candidates that are running for office, we look for candidates that what we call are exceptional candidates. Candidates that someone's willing to make an exception for. They might say, I would never vote for a Democrat, but I would vote for Jessica. Or I would never vote for a Democrat, but I would vote for Hillary. They were willing to make an exception. It's my pleasure to introduce to you a few exceptional candidates for common good that are running right here in this area in Holland and Ottawa County. So those of you that are running, Marcia and Abby and Don, if you would join me up here, I want to introduce you to some candidates that are running for office and give you a chance to meet them.
Good evening, everybody. This is the most encouraging rally I've been to in a long time. So I grew up here. I raised my family here. And as the Deputy Health Officer at the Ottawa County Department of Public Health, I had a super fulfilling career here, working for the health of you people that I love. Thank you. So I'm running for office now because of two words. You might not recognize them. Some of you might. The two words are Ottawa Impact. Yeah, weird. Yeah. So, yeah, you feel the same way I do. That's why I'm running. That's it. I mean, that's what started it. Their misuse of power through secretive decision making, wasteful spending, and plain old revenge politics has exposed a critical need for legislative reform in Lansing because they're breaking the law all over the place, and part of the problem is some of these laws are 100 years old. They're vague. We could tighten them up. It's not a hard job, but no one's doing it, including my opponent. So, as someone who was targeted by Ottawa Impact for several years, taken to federal court by them, I'm uniquely prepared, I think, to address the wrongs that have harmed our community and eroded my trust, maybe your trust, in our elected officials. So, since 2022, the Ottawa County Republican Party, I used to be a Republican too, nice to meet you, they have only backed Ottawa Impact-aligned candidates. A month ago, they endorsed my opponent. Ottawa Impact just endorsed them for 2024. They endorsed them for 2022. So I'm your only choice. If you happen to live in Hudsonville, Jennison, Zeeland, in the very east side of Holland Township. And I'm backed by some men that I'm super proud of. 5 current and former Republican elected officials, and 2 current Democrat leaders in our community. That's kind of unprecedented, but now Kamala's got a lot of them too, so I'm pretty proud of her. So I'm Marcia Mansoray. I might be on your ballot, though most of you voted already, so good job you. And I want you to know that faith, hope, and love still exist in politics. Thank you.
Hello, good evening. Thank you. My name is Abby Klump-Harns. I am proud to be the Democratic candidate running to serve the 86th House District or the Greater Holland area as your next state representative. Thank you. I am born and raised here in Holland. This community raised me. This community taught me how to be a good neighbor, to not only embrace but live the values of faith, hope, and love. Now, my journey here on this stage started almost exactly 8, maybe 9 years ago. I was 22 years old, a senior at Grand Valley State University studying American history, and Donald Trump became the next president of the United States. I remember walking through Grand Valley's campus the day after the election and feeling the fear, the despair, the betrayal radiating off of my peers. I knew in that moment, again, as a student of American history, that I was living through something big, through something formative. And like the question we put to those who came before us in these monumental moments that shape us as a nation, I knew one day I was going to be asked, What did you do? What did you do when you saw extremism take over our country? What did you do when you saw values that don't align with the country that you were born into and came to love? And I had to turn that question back on myself. Okay, what are you gonna do? I wanted to say that I got involved, that they stood up and I fought back. So I jumped into a career in politics and have proudly served at the local, state, and federal levels of government. And I am so incredibly proud to be able to stand before you today as an individual, a leader, and community member who wants to lead the Greater Holland area forward to a future of inclusivity and success. And I am so grateful for all of you coming here today. I really needed this today. This fed my soul. I was getting pretty tired. And I thank you for your energy and your hope and your support. Let's take our country back.
Hello, everybody. Hi, my name is Doug Zylstra. I am the County Commissioner for the City of Holland. How many City of Holland residents do we have here? That is so great to see. It is really great to see you all. Thank you for coming. Thank you for being here. You know, I think what Abby says, it's been a long road for candidates. This is running for my fourth term. County Commission runs every 2 years, just like State House of Representatives. It's going to be a 4-year term, but I started running in 2014. Basically, a quarter of my time is running for office. And when it gets to this stage of the campaign, Brian, I see you shaking your head. It's a long campaign. We really appreciate your support. We really appreciate, you all, what you do. I see a lot of volunteers who are working very hard. As candidates, I get to be on the same ballot as Abby. I get to be on the same platform with Marcia. So just thank you all for coming. I think, I don't want to go through my whole campaign literature, but I just want to come here and say thank you for coming. Right.
Thank you so much. Thank you for running. It's my real pleasure to introduce to you. You get a real treat. This is my friend Rob Shank.
Thanks, Rob. Other Rob. Double B Rob. I'm a single B. But I'm kind of something else too. I will tell you that I've been an ordained evangelical minister for 42 years. I've preached all over the country. I stopped counting after I'd been in several hundred pulpits as an itinerant evangelist. But for a number of years, I was based in Washington, D.C. In fact, 30 of those years on Capitol Hill. And here's where I become an interruption in the night. Because up until now, you have felt as good as I have about the people on this platform, haven't you? And they've given you hope and inspiration and joy, and you really liked them, and maybe even some of you have fallen in love with them, as I have. But now, you may not like the guy on the platform. Some of you may be like a woman who came up to me after one of our meetings the other night and said, "You were speaking only a few minutes when I wanted to come up and punch you." And she had good reason to feel that way. Another person came up and said, "I started tonight hating you." It changed. Thank God. But I understand that some of you will be very angry about what I'm going to tell you. Because tonight, I'm going to interrupt the joy and the pleasure and the hope and the happiness and the energy and make a confession. Because for over 30 years, as an activist on the religious right, I helped build the road that Donald Trump took to 1600 Pennsylvania Avenue. And I'm going to own that, and I'm going to beg your pardon for the injury that I did to many of you and to countless others beyond this gathering. Because as a leader in the so-called pro-life movement, I didn't advance respect for human life and human dignity at all. In fact, at the end of my tenure, I held plenty of people in utter contempt. And I made their lives more difficult, less happy, and even inflicted injury and harm on them. And for that, I have had to repent, and I've had to beg the pardon of many, and commit myself to first dismantling that roadway that Donald Trump took to the White House, and to do the repair for all of the harm I did with my colleagues for those decades. Now, may I tell you the better part of the story? Unless you want to come up and punch me, which I'll take, because I understand, and you need no permission from me to feel that way. But there came a day for me when I had to take a leave of absence from my work. I had worked tirelessly, relentlessly in Congress, in 2 White Houses, and ultimately behind the scenes at the Supreme Court. Maybe some of you read about it in the New York Times. Thank God they had the guts to expose it. But after all of the work I had done, none of which I'm proud of, most of which I deeply regret, there came a moment in the dusty, mildewed basement of a Lutheran seminary, reading the story of what my fellow evangelicals did in Germany in 1933, when the most popular Bible teacher of that era, the celebrity Christian personality of 1930s Germany, Paul Althaus, in April of 1933, declared Adolf Hitler and the Nazi Party a gift and miracle from God, delivered to Germany to return it to greatness. Does it sound eerily familiar? Because it did to me. And at that moment, the scales began to fall from my eyes. I looked at the volume that my instructors in Bible college and seminary had directed me to. In each and every case when I wrote a sermon, I was directed by my instructors to always go to one volume before you ever preach a sermon. Go to the Dictionary of New Testament Theology, edited by Gerhard Kittel. Are there other preachers among us here? Did you have Kittel on your shelf? As every evangelical minister I've ever known has Gerhard Kittel on, I'm sorry to limit it to, in my world, his shelf. And I was told, consult Kittle. Don't preach that sermon until you've looked at Kittle. And so I always pulled Kittle off my shelf to see what Gerhard said about the text before I treated it in the pulpit. And no one ever bothered to tell me that Gerhard Kittle, a committed Nazi, was Hitler's resident theologian that gave him so-called biblical justification for genocide. Now, isn't that something? We never noticed that Kittle was a Nazi. We either weren't curious enough or didn't care to know. And this shook my foundations. And so when I received an invitation to, of all things, the 80th birthday party for television personality Pat Robertson. And I went. I was obligated. I flew from Tacoma, or from Seattle Tacoma Airport back to Washington, D.C. to attend the birthday bash for Pat. And when I walked into the room filled with virtually every white evangelical luminary in this country, name them, they were in that room. And who was Pat's guest of honor but a New York real estate mogul and playboy named Donald Trump? And Pat gave him a platform to work a room full of evangelical influencers. Well, that was beyond the boundary lines, even for me. And I turned to one of my fellows and I said, "You've got to be kidding me." When I was in homiletics preaching class in Bible college 30 years before that, 35 years before that, I was told one of the best illustrations of living contrary to Christ was Donald Trump. Use him as a sermon illustration, my homiletics preaching instructor told me. And here he was, working the room. And I watched the sinister magic in his eyes. He read the room as a diabolical genius would, reading the room. What did we like? What did we not like? What fell flat? When did we roar with approval? And he picked it up and I watched it sink in. And that was when I realized we were in deep, deep moral crisis. And I began my exit strategy, which was long and painful and brings me now to this stage to say to you, if you have given up on your neighbors, if you have given up on your family members, if you have written off the pastors in this town, in this county that you know, and you say, there's no use, can't change, won't change, never will change, will you remember just one thing beyond your impulse to punch me? Will you remember that if I can change, then they can change? And that's the hope that we have. Thank you, one and all, for your patience.
Rob Shank, everybody. Another round of applause for Rob.
On 9/11, Al-Qaeda hijacked 4 commercial airplanes and deliberately crashed 2 of the planes into the north and south towers of the World Trade Center. The crashes created a massive fireball, leaving a thick gray plume of smoke over New York City. The Twin Towers collapsed and people outside ran in fear for their lives. The 3rd hijacked plane was crashed into the side of the Pentagon and created a wide and burning gash. And after passengers learned about the 4th attack, Flight 93, they bravely fought back and crashed the plane into an open field in western Pennsylvania, about 20 minutes by air from Washington, D.C. The 9/11 attacks killed 2,977 people and would become the deadliest terrorist attack from a foreign adversary on U.S. soil. I remember hearing the news at work that morning, and after arriving home later that afternoon, watching the events unfold on my television. The scenes of mass devastation, confusion, and loss resembled a war zone and overwhelmed me with such anger and grief that I wept uncontrollably while beating the air with my fists. It would be a day to never forget, not just because of these overwhelming emotions, but also because of my growing obligation towards service to country and a widening sense of love for country. Because of 9/11, I would enlist in the military. So standing in a room with a handful of young men and women, I prepared to take the military's oath of enlistment. A sergeant called us to attention, directed us to raise our right hand and to repeat after him. I, Nick Brock, do solemnly swear that I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same, and that I will obey the orders of the President of the United States and the orders of the officers appointed over me, according to regulations and the Uniform Code of Military Justice, so help me God. It was at that moment that I had committed my whole self to protect and defend not just a particular branch of service, not the flag, not the country, and not even the president, but rather to the Constitution, which symbolized all of these things. You see, I was now a part of something much larger than just myself. Indeed, so help me God. I would serve under this oath for 10 years in the United States Air Force and afterward be honorably discharged. 6 years after that, however, I would be reminded of the solemnity for my oath on January 6, 2021. On January 6, former President Trump summoned a violent mob to march on the U.S. Capitol in support of his wholly fabricated charge that the 2020 presidential election had been stolen from him. 2,500 people overran police barricades, beat, bloodied, and tased police officers. They smashed through windows, they smashed through doors, and they ran through the halls of Congress threatening to hang Mike Pence, execute the Speaker of the House, Nancy Pelosi, and do God knows what to other office holders. 114 law enforcement officers were injured, and 7 people died as a result of the violent attack. The insurrection of January 6th was an unprecedented domestic terrorist attack on U.S. soil, full stop. I remember hearing the news while sitting at my dining room table and watching the scene unfold on my laptop. and abruptly standing up to pace my living room with tears of anger and grief streaming down my cheeks. My visceral reaction was reminiscent of 9/11 as I recalled my oath. I will support and defend the Constitution of the United States. January 6th would be another day to never forget, not just because the seat of our democracy was desecrated, but because of this simple yet breathtaking fact. Former President Trump and I, both worlds apart from each other in every sense of the word, had one thing in common. One. To defend the Constitution to our best abilities. Yet I was the one who bore true faith and allegiance to the same and left my post honorably. You see, January 6th was more than just a quote-unquote problem, or that simply former President Trump had just left the White House as vice presidential candidate and military veteran J.D. Vance would have us all believe. No, to the contrary. Former President Trump attempted to overturn the election results in order to seize power illegally and remain in office. And when the violent mob he had mobilized laid siege to our Capitol, he watched the attack on television and refused for more than 3 hours to tell the insurrectionists to go home. And after they had damaged the Capitol to the tune of nearly $3 million, Trump finally chose to address his insurrectionist mob with a wink and nod of approval, saying, "We love you. You're very special." Trump violated his oath to the Constitution and brought dishonor to thousands of military members around the globe who remained steadfast to their oath of enlistment, and most unequivocally to those who lost their lives in service of that very cause. My fellow Americans, we must choose in this election to honor those who give everything and who gave everything in support of American freedom and democracy. This is our obligation and the cause of our time. We know full well that the first 3 words of the original handwritten and signed Constitution makes this obligation clear, declaring from the outset, "We the people," with oversized black lettering that looms large over all the rest. In the same way, we must continue to place an oversized and emboldened obligation to vote for political leaders that will do the same. In order to form a more perfect union, we the people depend on the goodwill of our leaders and their dedication to duty to ensure the survival of our republic. My fellow Americans, is this not our obligation and the cause of our time?
Yeah.
If your answer is an overwhelming and heart-expanding yes, will you stand with me right here and now on this grass and under this sky in support of that very cause? Will you stand with me? Thank you, ma'am. Thank you, ma'am. Yes, sir. Thank you. Thank you. Will you continue to stand and say yes to support and defend the Constitution of the United States with your vote? Yes. Will you stand with me and say yes to ensure the survival of our republic with your vote? Yes. And will you continue to stand with me and shout yes to support democracy for all with all of your faith, with all of your hope, and with all of your love, not only through Election Day, but on each and every day? Yes. My name is Nick Brock. I'm a United States Air Force veteran, and I do solemnly swear that I will continue to support and defend the Constitution of the United States against all enemies, foreign and domestic, and that I will bear true faith and allegiance to the same. So help me God.
I think it was 4 years ago we were holding a rally right here. Maybe some of you were there. Nick and Christine, his wife, were walking across, and they came up and we talked about what we do. And I said, maybe you want to come with us. We're going to be going off to Detroit. And they went home and talked about it. And next thing you know, Nick was on the bus. And now Nick runs Vote Common Good West Michigan. Maybe you know the story that Daniel Dietrich wrote that song, the hymn for the 81%. And in 2020, we were traveling the country and people started telling us about this song. And we found someone named Aaron who knew someone who knew Dan. And we got his phone number. And I called Dan and said, hey, I know you live in Indiana. We're going to be going to Minnesota. Would you mind coming with us and doing the song? And Dan said yes. And he came and then later got fired from his church over that song and said, well, I'm a little more free. And now he's on the bus. You might know where this is going. We came into town and Christy and Brian were involved in faith and politics. And we said, maybe you want to get on the bus. And they said yes. We want you on the bus. Maybe you can't climb in and take on a bunk. Or maybe you can. That's why we have two. We're leaving here. We're going to try to get to Ohio tomorrow, and then we're going to Erie, and then we're going to Pittsburgh, and then we're going to Harrisburg, and then we're going to Philadelphia, and then we're going to Hershey, and then we're going to Washington, D.C. Maybe you want to come with us. Or maybe you want your name on that bus. We'd like your name on that bus. Maybe you want your voice with us. Maybe some of you heard Julia Roberts make a little ad for us, and if you haven't seen it yet, look that up. Maybe today you heard that George Clooney made a little ad for us. For nothing. They just did it because it matters, and they want to remind good people of good faith that what they do in their voting booth is nobody else's business if they don't want it to be. Maybe your name needs to be on the bus. Maybe you needed to come back in 2018 and buy a Vote Common Good hat and still have it on the back there with sweat marks all over it. Maybe you want to pick one of those up over here. Because friends, we are not here to faith, hope, love you, and leave you. We want to take you with us. Maybe your name is on the bus. Maybe your body is on the bus. Maybe you want to travel along behind us. Maybe you want to get in the tank with us. We'd love that. We don't have a lot of money. We're not funded by anybody, but as we say in PBS land, viewers like you. So if you want to be part of this, maybe you want to fill the tank. But maybe you don't want to put a bunch of money into diesel, which you can do right over there, because there are 4 things that move us around this country: faith, hope, love, and diesel. Maybe you don't want to fill that tank. Maybe you want to fill one of these tanks. It's 15 or 16 of us over the next couple of days. They're going to be traveling together. Maybe you want to buy a lunch. Maybe you want to buy a dinner. Maybe you want to pay for a hotel room for the bus driver that drives that while the rest of us sleep inside the bus. Maybe you want to chip in on that. We'd love to have you feel like you're part of this with us. So whether you can come along, whether you can wear a hat, whether you can take one of these faith, hope, and love signs and put it in your yard right next to a Democratic candidate sign and really tell your neighbors what your faith, hope, and love is driving you to do and invite them to join you. However you want to be involved, we don't want to forget you. We want to feel like we're traveling with you. So if you wouldn't mind coming up and signing this bus or visiting Beth over here or saying hello to somebody, we have one last little song for you. We're going to sing because we know, as Dan will say in a moment, that until we're all free, we're not all really free. So we're going to keep working on that way. So thank you for being a part of Vote Common Good. Thank you for supporting these candidates. Doug, I said it to you personally, but I want to say it to you again. He's been at every single event we've ever done here in Holland, and we really appreciate having county commissioners that show up. Marcia, thank you. Abby, thank you for being here. It really means a lot to us. We know it means a lot to you. And good people of Holland, the whole country's going to hear your voice on Election Day. Thanks for being a part of all of this, and come up and sign the bus if you wouldn't mind.
Yeah, we've been singing this song a lot. It's by a guy named William Matthews, and it does remind us that no one is free till we're all free. And if you pick it up, sing along. And while we're singing, feel free to get up, sign the bus, visit the merch table. We'll be here for a bit, so hang out with us. Thanks for being here. There's a world at war, caught in suffering, silent casualties. Oh God, grant us peace in these sleepless nights. I can hardly breathe despite brutality. I know that we'll be free. I know that we'll be free. So let the light in, keep it shining. Let it break into the darkness. All that love is us to see. We'll all be free, yeah. So let the light in, keep it shining. Let it break into the darkness. All that love is us to see. We'll all be free, yeah. In these desperate times, love will hold us here. Love will join our hands, teach us to have no fear. So we lay our hate down to wash their feet, yes. And when we see our brother, yes, we'll all be free, yes, we'll all be free. Yeah. So let the light in, keep it shining, let it break into the darkness. All the love dares us to see, we'll all be free. Yeah. Let the light in, keep it shining, let it break into the darkness.